Today's exhortation will be provided by Brother Joseph Fordham. His title is The Unredeemable Redeemed, the 10 Rebellions. And he has no reading, so let's give our attention to Brother Joseph.
Good morning, everyone. Brad, you might need this. So I had given the first part of this a couple months ago, and this is going to concentrate on the 10 rebellions. So I wanted some of the kid volunteers, if I could, to come see Matt, because every time you hear the word rebellion, you get to give a little jingle. Not 15 minutes worth of it, just a shake. So can I have some kid volunteers? Okay, just come up and meet Matt and grab some. Just come up front. So we're going to be talking about the 10 rebellions in the Exodus account. Last time we talked about the slave mentality. They're coming. You guys can come up. Or do you want to just raise your hand and he'll distribute them? That's faster. It's intimidating, I know. So every time you hear the word rebellion, let's give it a try. You can shake them. So the reason we're studying this is not to be morose. It's not to be sad and depressing. I want you to think of it, how many of you all have ever been in a canyon before? Okay, when you shout in a canyon, what happens? It echoes. And guess what? So does with these 10 rebellions all through the canyon of history. They keep echoing, don't be like them. Do not do what they did. Don't believe what they believed, because these 10 rebellions cost them everything. I just want you to think about it. There you go. Woo! So when you think about it, they had seen the 10 miracles in Egypt, hadn't they? Then they were taken through the Red Sea, which was symbolic of baptism. Then 10 times in the wilderness, they rebelled. Okay? So the point of it is to us is that we are to move away from them. Just like Moses said, you people, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram because they have rebelled. So that's the point of it to us, is that we need to move away from that in every respect. So in Revelations it says, repent therefore, otherwise I will soon come to you and will fight against them with the sword and with my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give the hidden manna, which was one of the tests in the wilderness, and I will also give him a white stone with his name on it, and they will know to him I received it, who receives it. And then from Deuteronomy, it says, do not forget, be careful to follow the command I give you today, so that you may increase and enter the possession of the land the Lord promised on oath to your forefathers. Remember how the Lord your God led you by the way in the desert these 40 years to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commands. We, by extension, are no different. We are on our life's journey through the wilderness. We're being tested to see if we really will follow his commands or if we really will not. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to teach you that man does not live by bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Who remembers that phrase in the New Testament? Who said those words? Go ahead, Jacob.
Jesus.
When?
In the garden, when he was being tempted.
In the wilderness, right? Where do his 3 answers come from? You're right. All 3 answers come from Deuteronomy. So, in the wilderness, they were tested how many times? And the answers are 3, 3, 3, and 1. Meaning that the 3 answers that Christ gave in the wilderness were sufficient to cover all 10 of their rebellions. There you go. So it's important to realize that all those answers were given to them by Moses from God. They had the opportunity at every test to use those words in Deuteronomy that Christ did in the wilderness to obey the Lord. So I just want you to see the difference in here. He says, your clothes did not wear out on your feet, nor did they swell during those 40 years. Know then that your heart, that a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God will disciplines you. Having a hard time because the screen is like infinitely smaller on this than the other view. I'm gonna see if I can go up to the display settings because I can't see. So, well, Jacob, if you could come up and fix this, I'm going to talk about the slide. It's like the size of a phone. So I wanted to show this map because these are the 10 rebellions. It's the first one was near Hierath, right by Ramses. So I put a red star by each of the ones of where the rebellion happened.
Sorry, man.
It's okay. So you can see there's a star-studded trail all the way along. I didn't put all of them on because there are not all known where some of the camps were, but it should be helpful. But you can see the first one is tested at the Red Sea. What did they say at the Red Sea?
Just slide it so he can
Did
see
you bring
it.
us here to die?
Is that what he wants?
We're
Make this bigger. Slide that.
That you brought us here to die. And then the next one, number 2, is bitter water. And they rebelled against the Lord there. Then there is, like, we got nothing to eat. And number 3 is the manna. And number 4 is water from the rock of life. We don't have any water. So every single time their answer was what? Let's kill Moses and Aaron, get new leaders, and go back to Egypt. Let's kill them. Thank you. Let's kill them and go back to Egypt every single time. Oh, I can't get any larger. I'll just stand over here so I can see my own slides. So then there's one of the most signature pieces. Number 5 is like Moses is on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights receiving the oracles of God and the 10 Commandments, and that's when they decide to worship the golden calf. Really unbelievable. So somebody needs to rewrite the 12 days of Christmas to the 10 rebellions so that we can get all this together. That's a weak ringing, guys. Number 6 is complaining of their hardships and the fire coming. Number 7 is craving meat, and that was fulfilled with the quail, number 7. Then number 8 was a huge rebellion. It was the envy and slander against Moses and Aaron. Unbelievable, because he had married a Cushite wife. Then number 9 is the bad report from some of the spies. And number 10 is when they said, we're not going in. We're not going to go to the land. So those are the 10 rebellions. These are most of the places that they happened in the desert. So we'll go on to the next slide. So this gives you the full yield, and I'll email this to you if you want it, but it tells you the when, the where, how Pharaoh's reaction was. And this was all for the plagues, and they were meant to knock out these gods on the right-hand side. Each one of the rebellions was to knock out one of the gods of Egypt, and they had a pantheon of gods. Does anybody know how many? Oh, over 4,000 gods in Egypt. We only know like Ra and some of the other ones, but there is Pharaoh himself, Seraphis, Isis, Osiris, and many, many, many others. So you've got to realize how these plagues were specifically targeted to say your God doesn't exist. So the next one is, like I said, we have all of the places of the rebellion, the time when it happened, the reference, who did it, the impetus, the sarcasm and disbelief to grumbling, idolatry, complaining, slandering, false witness, and rebelling against God's command, and the punish that came to them. You see, for the first 4, there's no punishment. But then it keeps getting more severe. 23,000 of them die in a plague. Fire consumes the camp. Severe plague that killed the rabble. Miriam stricken with leprosy. 8 spies were killed by a plague. And the last one,
the 20 years old and under were the only ones who were saved. That whole generation, 1.5 million people, died in the wilderness. Their bones were scattered in the desert, and God said, they will never enter my rest. Not now. They won't go into the promised land, and they will not be in the kingdom. Complete oblivion. They died in the wilderness. So these rebellions should be taken. I'm getting a weaker and weaker audience. They're dying slowly. They had to see this as getting more extreme, and God's disgust by the end of it. So the rebellion at the Red Sea, there we go. It says, as Pharaoh approached the Israelites, looking up, they were for the Egyptians. Marching after them, they were terrified and cried to the Lord and said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us up out of the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would be better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Are there any problems with this statement? It is riddled with lies. None of it is true. They did cry to the Lord over and over again to be relieved of slavery. Who wouldn't? And then they were like, it was better for us? I'm like, have you lost your marbles? No, it's not. And they just keep saying, you know, did you just bring us out here to die? After they crossed the Red Sea, not only were they going to be saved, but the entire nation of people, their military, was going to be obliterated in the Red Sea. And they were going to be celebrating with tambourines. Who's got the tambourine? Bring it. They were going to be celebrating with Miriam on the other side with tambourines, saying, God has delivered us. So I'll tell you a funny story. There was a Baptist revival, tent revival, and in it the preacher was talking about the Red Sea and how he had parted it for the Hebrews to go across. So there was this one woman, and she was just singing hallelujah and praising God all the way through it. And this other man who was a scoffer in the audience wanted to silence her. So he said, you know, that time of year, the Red Sea is only about 3 inches deep. So they didn't really, you know, it was no big thing for the Lord to create dry ground for them to go across. And so she got quiet and didn't say anything more. Then the preacher got to the part where he was talking about Pharaoh crossing over and being drowned. And she goes, the Lord drowned him in 3 inches of water. Hallelujah. And goes on. And the point to us is that's what the scoffers deserve for being scoffers. And let me tell you, on this 40-year camping trip, there's a lot of scoffers. And they doubt and they challenge God left, right, and center. That's why we have no place for sarcasm or being sardonic as believers. You got them right here on the trip, and you can see what they said. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord. The Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You will only need to be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move. Raise your staff and stretch it over the water of the sea and divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go after them. I will gain glory through Pharaoh and his army, through his chariots and through his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So there's actually archaeological evidence to show those bronze wagon wheels of the chariots who were captured in the middle of the Red Sea. And it's pretty amazing because it did happen just as the Lord said. I'm going to keep going for the sake of time. Let's talk about the second rebellion. Yay! And this is the bitter water, right? So it says, when Moses led Israel from the Red Sea and they went to the desert of Sur, for 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Meribah, they could not drink the water because of its bitterness. That is why the place is called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses and said, What are we to drink? And Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed a piece of wood, and he threw it in the water, and the water became sweet. And the Lord made a decree and a law for them, and he tested them, and he said, if you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Then they came from Elim, where they were, with the 12 springs and 70 palms, and they camped there near the water. So let me make a distinction here, okay? Is it okay to question God? Yes or no? Yes. Jacob? Okay. And we have proof of this from whom? Jesus, Moses, Elijah, Job, and Jeremiah. Is it okay to blame God for your circumstances? Okay. Is there a distinction between the two? Can sometimes there be a very gray line between the two? Yes. So we have to be very careful and have good discernment between them. So in Psalm 78, it says, they forgot what he had done, the wonders that he had showed them. He did miracles in their sight and their fathers in the land of Egypt and the regions of Zoan. He divided the sea and led them where they were through, led them through. He made the water stand firm like a wall. He guided them with a cloud by the day and the light of a fire at night. He split the rocks in the desert and gave them water in abundance for seas. He brought streams out of the rocky crag and made the water flow down like rivers. But they continued to sin against him, rebelling in the desert against the Most High. So they were constantly rebelling over and over again, even though they'd seen all these miracles. And you think to yourself, after you'd seen miracle after miracle, how could they think this way? But it's always right after our own hearts, and we're not far from it at all. So in John, the same kind of thing happens, where I want to make a bridge from what happened with Moses to you. And we're going to do it through Thomas. But of the one of the 12, Thomas, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples kept telling him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, if I don't see the marks on his hands, and put my finger into the mark of his nails, and put my hand in his side, I will never believe. After 8 days, the disciples were indoors again, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus came in and stood among them, and he said, peace to you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and observe my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Don't be an unbeliever, but a believer. Thomas responded to him, my Lord and my God. And Jesus said, because you have seen me, you have believed. Those who believe without seeing are blessed. That's you and I, brothers and sisters. It's you and I. Do we need the physical evidence to stop being a scoffer, to stop being a mocker? We need to do this for the world too. We have to be the catalyst to say, don't mock God. His promises are not dead. They are active even today. So Thomas serves as an example because he had seen all the miracles of Christ, and yet he still didn't believe he'd been raised from the dead. The Hebrews had seen all God's miracles in Egypt, plus the Red Sea, plus all the miracles in the desert, and yet they still did not believe. And that's why it says, without faith, finish the sentence. It is totally impossible. And their doubt and their constant challenges to the Lord cost them everything. So I'm not going to read all this for the sake of time, but this was the case, and I'm going to make this case for this one, for the bitter water, and also for the golden calf. Because when Moses came down from the mountain, what did he do? He saw the golden calf and he broke the 10 Commandments. What did he do with that golden calf? He ground them up and made them drink it, right? That's where this passage, I believe, comes into play. And it's when a jealous husband suspects that his wife is cheating on him. He was to go to the temple of the Lord. He was to write down these curses on paper, wash it off in the water, and take some dust from the temple floor and put it in and make her drink it. And if she was pure, nothing would happen. And if she wasn't, there was rot. So he used this both with the golden calf incident and the bitter water. So I just wanted to bring that up as a point. I'm going to keep going for the sake of time. What's interesting is Proverbs has something to say about the bitter and the sweet water, and so does James. For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but at the end she is bitter as gall, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, and her steps lead straight to the grave. So it's making this point of her that there's this bitterness and this sweetness. Though the wine that we talked about earlier tasted okay, but then it was bitter at the end if it was applied correctly. In Jeremiah, he says the same thing, where he makes the people drink a poisonous water as he did with people who rebelled. It's very weak ringing now. It's very faint. What man is wise enough to understand this? Who is instructed by the Lord and can explain it? Why has the land been ruined and laid waste in the desert, and no one can cross? The Lord said, because they have forsaken my law, which I set before them, and have not obeyed me or followed my law. Instead, they have followed the stubbornness of their hearts and followed the Baals, and their fathers taught them. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty God says. See, I will make this people eat bitter food and drink poisoned water. I will scatter them among the nations. Neither they nor their fathers have known, and I will pursue them with the sword until I have destroyed them. So that wilderness experience extends to all the Jews over time, and it would continue to drink this bitter water. It's sweet for those who are faithful, it's bitter for those who are not. So it also says this was like Sodom as well. In Jeremiah 20:25, it says, they committed adultery and lived a lie. They strengthened their hands of evildoers so that no one turns from his wickedness. They are all like Sodom to me. A people of Jerusalem are like Gomorrah. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says concerning his prophets. I will make them eat bitter food and drink poisoned water, because from their prophets in Jerusalem, ungodliness has spread throughout the land. So the righteous people, like yourselves, are the ones that stay God's anger from being applied to everyone. What did God say to Elijah after he ran for 40 days? He got up to the mountain, and he says, I've been very zealous for the Lord. I'm the last one. There isn't anybody else who serves you, and I've almost been killed. What does the Lord respond? Exactly. He says, there's still 7,000 more who haven't bowed down to me. Bowed down to Baal. So we're not the only ones. There are others, and we need to reach out to them before it's too late. So also in Deuteronomy, it says, make sure that no man or woman, clan or tribe among you today, whose heart turns away from the Lord our God, will go and worship the gods of those nations. Make sure there is no root among you that produces such bitter poison. And it did. Once one part of the population was infected with idol worship, it kept spreading like cancer or gangrene until God had to do what? Cut them off to stop it from spreading anymore. So in Hebrews, it says, make every effort to live in peace with all men and be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that none of you misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See to it that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance and rights as the oldest son. Afterwards, as you know, when he wanted to inherit a blessing, he was rejected. He could bring about no change of mind, though he sought it, the blessing, with tears. You have come to the mountain that cannot be touched, that is burning with fire, which is like Mount Sinai, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to the trumpet blast or the voice speaking words, that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touched the mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, onto the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. you have come to thousands upon thousands of annuals of joyful assembly. So he's making a point. He's comparing those rebellions that happened in the desert, there you go, and Mount Zion, and them, Mount Sinai, and that they were fearful and trembling before the Lord. But he's making a distinction. As believers, you're not before Mount Zion. You are before, not Mount Sinai, you are before Mount Zion. He's making a distinction between the two, and I think it's important to see that. I'm going to keep, so let me actually read this. To the church and the firstborn whose names are written in heaven, you have come to God, to judge of all men, and the spirits of the righteous men made perfect. To Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and sprinkled with blood that speaks better words than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they had not escaped, they would refuse him who warned them on the earth. How much less until we, if we turn away from him who warned us from heaven. At this time his voice shook the earth, and now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that they cannot be shaken if any remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably and with reverence. For our God is a consuming fire. So the point here is that the Lord is going to shake the earth. He did back then, and he's shaking it right now. What happened in Turkey and Syria this week was 7.8 on, not the Richter scale, there's a new one, it's an MMW, which is extremely strong. One happened at 4 in the morning, the other one happened 12 hours later. And over 3,000 buildings collapsed in both Syria and in Turkey. There are now between 23 and 25,000 recorded dead. It's a horror. And the recovery, the timeline is never more than about 5 days. But it got shortened because of what? The weather. It's freezing cold. You're in rubble. How are you going to stay warm with no heat for 5 days? I mean, it's nearly impossible. But what the Lord's saying is he's going to shake the earth. So we're not to be pursuing the things of this world. We can't afford it. Because I'll tell you this, what is the worst emotion you can possibly feel? Regret. It's horrible. What did these people feel? What did Esau feel when he lost his inheritance and lost the birthright? Massive regret. Could he change anything? There was no way to fix it. And we are fixers as Americans. We love fixing things. Everybody's got their own toolbox, but this is something that can't be fixed. The regret is unbelievable for these people when they reject the land. What do they do right after they reject the land? Yeah. Don't worry, Moses and Aaron, we're gonna appoint our own leaders and we're gonna own the land and we're gonna take it. What happened to them? They got cut down. And God said, you will never enter my rest. So that's why it's such a miracle. Numbers 14 is the fulcrum point in the whole account of the Exodus, because that's when God says, you're never entering my land because of your 10 rebellions against me. There we go. Keep them awake, boys and girls. So that's the point, is that there's 10 more rebellions after Numbers 14. And that's how God gets rid of them. He uses their own rebellions to put a noose around their neck and hang themselves. And that's exactly what they do. So there's 10 rebellions that leads up to number 14, and there's 10 rebellions that does them out. So that's what I want to kind of try to get across to us. Now, there is the incident of the manna, which is recorded in Exodus 16, and this is where it also falls apart, because God is testing them. He's touching the primary needs, right? He's not killing them with disease. It's just there isn't water when they want it, and there isn't food when they want it. And the whole point is to do what? Create dependence on God for their daily food. So I've always wondered this question: why didn't the Lord take a C-130 and drop 3 months worth of manna in the wilderness. That's more efficient, isn't it? Doesn't require this daily thing going on. Why not drop, 4 months worth of supplies in the desert? Yeah, it was a daily dependence on God. That's the point. With water, it was a daily dependence. With food, it was a daily dependence. He's not a part-time God. He's a full-time, fully committed God. He is not part-time. But do we as believers treat him like a part-time God? Yes, we do. We only cry out to him when we really need him. And that's the point of this. And once again, they say the same mantra over and over again. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around with pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death. Is that truth or a lie? Why is it a lie? Get back to work. Do you think they were on lounge chairs eating food? This is not the picture of what was going on in Egypt. They are deluded. How many times do we think we had it better in the past than we do now? It happens a lot, and they did too. So then it says, the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you, and the people are to go out each day and gather for that day. In this way, I will test them to see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, when they go prepare and bring it in, and this is to be twice as much as they gather on other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening, you will know it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. In the morning, you will see the glory of the Lord because he has heard your grumblings against him. Who are you that you should grumble against Moses? Moses also said, you will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. So he tells them, you're doing this against the Lord, and he's going to show you, once again, after this rebellion, who the Lord really is. So we're going to, just so you know, I'm going to stop at 3 rebellions because we're getting close to the top of the hour, and we'll pick it up again next time. So in Exodus 16:9, it says, Moses and Aaron said, say to the entire Israelite community, come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And Aaron was speaking with the whole Israelite community. They looked towards the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread, and you will know that I am God. And then the quail covered the camp as well, and we'll actually get into that another one. There's a couple things I wanted to bring forth, though. So it says, but he knows the way that I take, and when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet are close to following his steps. I have kept to his way without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. That's from Job during his test to his friends, and he's like, our daily bread is the word of the Lord, and that's what sustains us. And Christ reiterates this from Deuteronomy, and it's like, do not forget the Lord. Be careful to follow every command I'm giving you today so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land that the Lord promised on oath to your forefathers. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way through the desert through 40 years to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would follow his commands. He humbled you, caused you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothes did not wear out, and we read this before. Nothing basically happened to them. So this bread was the word of the Lord that he wanted them to get. So, and we know that all their needs were met. And then in Nehemiah chapter 9, it says, God had provided in the wilderness. Because your great compassion, you did not abandon them in the desert. By day, a pillar of cloud did not cease to guide them on their path, nor the pillar of by night to shine on their way as they were to take. You gave them food, spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths, and you gave them water for their thirst. For 40 years you sustained them in the desert. They lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not become swollen. So all these major prophets constantly come back to these moments in the wilderness to say, God sustained you. He tested you, but he sustained you for all this time. Things did not wear out while you were in the desert. So don't refuse to hold on to him. And I think we read this one from chapter 12. But in Luke, it says, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, and nothing hidden that will not be made known. What you have said in the dark will be heard in the daylight. That you have whispered in the inner ear in the rooms will be proclaimed from the rocks. I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body and can do no more. But I will show you the one to fear. Fear him who, after killing the body, has the power to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten? Indeed, they are very hairs of your head are numbered. Don't be afraid, for you are worth more than many sparrows. So this one is from Psalm 78. I'm going to stop there. But this is a reaccounting of this. Like I said, this echo through this canyon of history, these echoes are constantly bounding down the timelines. And it says, but they continued to sin against him, rebelling in the desert against the Most High. They willfully put God to the test by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, can God spread a table in the desert? When he struck the rock, they gushed out, and streams flowed abundantly. But can he also give us food? Can he supply us meat for his people? When the Lord heard him, he was very angry, and he broke out against Jacob, and the wrath against those in Israel, for they did not believe in God and trust in his deliverance. So when we're in a crisis, we need to check ourselves and meditate for a moment and say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to doubt the Lord. When God said he was going to bring the quail, what was Moses' response? Does anybody remember? Yeah, but then after that, what did he think about the Lord providing enough quail for the entire assembly? He said, even if you opened up all the heavens, could you feed all these people? Even he doubted it. So that's the axiom I kind of want to leave you with. Man is always trying to underestimate, to quantify God's great power. It's limitless. Its only parameters are he can't be tempted and he can't sin. And he can't work with stubborn people, as these people were. It was the only thing he couldn't do. So young people, when people tell you nothing is impossible for God, those are the 2 qualifiers, is that he can't be tempted and he can't sin. But in here, he can't work with these stubborn people to bring about a change. So if you can collect all the fun stuff, we'll conclude and pick up next time, but I just want you to see these rebellions are applicable today. And these rebellions can be avoided. Their last hurrah. So we'll stop there. Thank you for your time and attention.